Hi, my name is Matt Bristow and you're watching Cherry Red TV. Today we've got another in our series looking at some of the stories behind some of the most iconic record labels in music history. And today's label is Nude Records, and I'm joined in the studio today by Saul Galpern, founder of Nude.
Hi.
Saul, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So looking back at the beginnings of the label in the early 1990s, can you give us sort of a brief history of your own involvement with music prior to starting the label, and what was your motivation for beginning Nude?
Yeah. Well, I moved down from Glasgow, which is where I was originally born, and with an ambition to obviously work within music, because didn't feel there was enough scope up in Scotland to do that. And so very early on, when I was sort of in my teens, came down to see if I could find a way of getting involved. And I kind of always collected music anyway, and was a big fan of records, obviously, and didn't fully understand what the whole label thing meant, but I knew it was something I wanted to be kind of part of. Eventually I kind of worked in retail. There was a store called Bonaparte Records, which at the time actually was one of the most influential mail order departments they had. Funnily enough, now with the internet things were different, but there it was like they used to advertise in the back of the NME all the brand new sort of exciting new albums that were out, sort of early, this is sort of like 82, 83, 84, around that period. There was all the kind of like new wave, kind of post-new wave kind of records that, I guess if you lived in, the Shetland Islands, you had no chance of getting hold of them, and we used to just, they used to send us, letters with checks and postal orders, and just stick them in the back of put them in mailers and send them off to these, kids who were desperate to hear music they'd probably only heard on Radio 1, John Peel probably, or some other weird late night radio station, and probably read about it in the NME as well. But they had a couple of record stores, Bonaparte. I guess there was sort of light rough trade in that way, where it was kind of there was a very niche and it was very alternative, and sort of created these kind of people that were into that style of music again, or real music fans would come to Bonaparte. And I worked at their store in King's Cross and did that for a while, and I was going to see lots of bands and live, and I kept telling them about things on a regular basis, and things that were coming up, and they said they wanted to do a label, so kind of I was basically pushed myself to get involved in the label, and started that way really. There was only a staff of there was only two of us actually initially, and the first sort of act that I'd seen and mentioned to them was a band from Birmingham called the Au Pairs, who they signed with this sort of two girl, two guy, 4-piece kind of agit pop kind of political kind of sort of around the time of the sort of Delta 5 and Gang of Four. It was that sort of period, and they started a label called Human Records, and put out series of records, including the Au Pairs, and a #1 album in fact. And it was a time where independence seemed to be beginning to thrive a little bit, and it was independent chart and all that sort of stuff. So we're all part of that, and so I did that for a while, and then I can't. There was sort of I left with the guy who was running it, and he started another label called Camera with a K, and brought me with him, and I started to learn more stuff about how labels worked with him, and then again brought in some other interesting bands, and worked with the Fall and the Slits and the Mo-Dettes, and again the sort of again legendary kind of indie bands. Certainly the Fall stuff we put out, Hex Induction now, is probably one of the best Fall albums that they actually ever released, and most people's Fall fans' minds anyway. So it was an interesting time. We did a couple of compilation albums as well, and there was a sort of whole positive punk movement that started that I was very much sort of part of. I don't know why I'm being proud of it. I shouldn't be really, but it was a funny period because it was like the Face magazine. We're putting us all on the cover, and there was this group of people I was sort of hanging around with, and it was all kind of making some noises in London town, and just having a good time. And I don't really know where it was all going really, but I think in the end I just sort of realised I needed to kind of, I kept sort of seeing a lot of bands that were going on to be successful, and I couldn't really do much about it because I was, you know, just in a small office with very little funding, and so I took the plunge and went to work for a major label, and that would have been sort of around 85 or something, 84, 85, yeah, would have been. And it was Elektra UK, the first time they'd set up a division in the UK, though they're always was a part of the E and WEA. And obviously a great label, had a lot of history, and you know the things that they've done over the years, as you know, so we're a bit in awe of it, really. And the first band I found was a band from Manchester called Simply Red, which, you know, we signed, basically. And as I say, the rest is history, in a way. I mean, obviously, it's more detailed than that, but try to sort of... it's kind of looking back on it, obviously, they're an enormous band and sold, you know, however 50 million albums or something, or whatever it was. But, I mean, obviously, something that started off, ended not in the way I would have liked to, in terms from a fan musical point of view, because a little bit sort of chicken in the basket type music, obviously, at the end, but there was talent there, and he had an extraordinary voice, and it was an interesting time, and it was a period where there wasn't that much going on anyway. The guitar scene was a bit kind of dead, it wasn't very exciting, and, you know, there was a kind of Matt Post Smith's Manchester thing going on, but I mean, it wasn't sort of most exciting period. I think people were looking for new things, so, and they came along, I don't know, in a way, they were sort of white soul thing, you know. Yeah. But so yeah, we signed them, and a few other bits and pieces, and, you know, and it was a good period. I mean, there was I guess it kind of what got my reputation going was that specifically, and then you know, and then I moved to Ireland, which is another fantastic label with another amazing, you know, history, and worked with some good bands there. The Triffids from Australia, who were great, and Julian Cope. Obviously, Ex Teardrops, did an album with him, and the Christians from Liverpool did an album with him, you know, and then I sort of moved to RCA after that, which was less interesting for me and less successful for me, and I didn't really enjoy it, and found it sort of, it was also a very difficult time musically, and I just felt at that point, well, actually, I think I got the sack. Actually, I think everyone's got to get the sack from a record label first, anyway, before you. You know what I mean? I think they just made me redundant or something. I can't even remember what happened, but I think this was kind of like about 1990, 91 maybe or something. And I was kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to work for the man anymore. I just don't want to do it. And I kind of just thought, I'm not ready for it. I don't know how I can, but maybe I should try and do my own label. But I just felt I wasn't ready for it. And you know, I'd had all that experience, I still didn't feel confident enough. But you know, one day I just sort of sat down and gave myself a kind of, you know, wrote a whole kind of thing out, and I gave myself a sort of deadline, came up with a name, and sort of went out there and just, you know, came up with the name of the label, and which I just thought I wanted to come up with something that was sort of a bit pure and a bit kind of, I don't know, I was thinking of art and pop art and, you know, nude and just virgin, mute. I was just trying to think of, you know, and also something that wasn't, I liked the idea of it being a name that wasn't, could be associated with, didn't have to be just music, kind of, you know, a lot of labels have got these names that are very righteousness and very musically, or, you know, obviously it's a label or something, you know, ambiguous or something, you know. But anyway, so yeah, did that, and I mean, it was pretty kind of amazing, because, you know, I was expecting the long haul and very hard, difficult years ahead, which of course it was, but it was a period similar to the period we're sort of coming into now, in a way, where there was terrible sort of economy issues. There was a war just happened, the Gulf War. Yeah. There was definitely a recession. Music was, you know, a bit lost in a way. It was a bit, certainly from the sort of guitar alternative point of view. We come out of Acid House, which people were enjoying, and it was an interesting period, but it was Acid House, so there was kind of, you know, shoegazing bands like Chapter House and Ride, and
it seemed like there was you know, a fairly healthy underground scene in British guitar music, but it wasn't really crossing over into the wider consciousness as such.
I think you're right, and we kept getting told about these new bands, and I kept going to check them out and thinking, nah, they're disappointing, they're not as good. And I think it was that period where, you know, people were desperately trying to find something, and they were getting sort of continually let down. But it was quite a drab, dull period. It wasn't exactly exciting. There hadn't been anything, I guess, people to feel they could hold on to, probably since the Stone Roses debut album. It was the last British thing I think that people felt.
So did you, when you started the label, did you kind of have that in the back of your mind, or the fore of your mind, as a motivating force?
No, I didn't. I just thought to myself, I want to do a label that's distinctive, that's got style, that signs acts that move with distinction and style, things that I, you know, feel passionate about. I was hoping I could find something that might change people's lives, because I thought growing up, bands changed my lives, and, you know, whether it had been The Clash or whatever, you know, and I wanted to kind of, you know, Roxy Music. I wanted to find something that, you know, could maybe, though it was kind of a bit wishful thinking, but I didn't realise that when I was standing at the venue in New Cross on January the 4th or something, I think it was, or January the 8th or something, 1992, that actually I was witnessing the band that would actually change a lot of people's lives, including mine.
Yeah, I mean, I asked the question in terms of those thoughts or ambitions, because pretty much one of the first, if not the first band that you signed to the label were a band that did kind of bring guitar music back to the forefront and the mainstream in the British charts. And that was Suede.
Without question.
Can you sort of tell us a bit about, you know, your first involvement with them?
Yeah. I mean, I think Suede, without question, you know, history always has got a knack of rewriting itself in a good way and a bad way, and sometimes it's unfortunate, because I see some periods we go through, maybe specifically even now, that, you know, they're not being given the credit sometimes when they are. But there's no question that Suede kick-started something. There's no question they were the first band, and the first band that got people very excited for a long, long time, for many, many reasons. And what followed was an explosion, which of course, as we know, was called Brit-pop. But they were sexy, they were ambitious, they were glamorous, they were cocky, they were, you know, they were interesting lyrically. I mean, there was, you know, fantastic guitarists. I mean, there was a lot of things that they had going for them, and
they seemed almost as if they were the finished product before they'd even had a record out, you know.
And it was a bit. I mean, my story's an interesting story. I'll tell you, because it's quite funny actually. But this guy's always nice, these little stories, isn't it? How you come across things. But I was actually told about them by a guy who was running a night at a place called the Moonlight Club in West Hampstead, and he'd mentioned the name, and it didn't really sort of struck me as anything particularly special at all, the name or anything. And he gave me the name of someone to speak to, and I thought he said Bernard Butter. Of course, it was Bernard Butler. So I had this written as guy's name, Bernard Butter, and I thought that was great anyway. So I remember ringing up Bernard Butter and asking him to send me a demo, and they sent me a demo. And I remember listening to it and then thinking it was okay, but I wasn't, you know, sort of blown away about first listen. But it was only several months later that I noticed they were playing with 2 or 3 other bands at the venue Cross, that I wanted to tie it all in. I thought, I want to see them, oh, and they're playing as well. So it was a bit like that. It wasn't like I'd specifically gone to see Suede. It was just that they were someone I had been in contact with, and, you know, it was a coincidence that there was a combination of bands all playing at the same time, and I could tick them all off the box, you know, so I'll go and see all of them. And funnily enough, I couldn't find the Suede demo at all. Of course, ironic enough, when I came back after that night, it was actually the only cassette lying on top of my, you know, stereo, which was kind of just one of these weird, it was one of these weird things that happened. But I went to this place, as I say, the venue in New Cross, and the irony of it is there was other people from the music business there. It wasn't like I was alone. I think the lucky thing for me was that Suede had played before, only a couple of months before that, when they had Justine Frischmann in the band, and people completely dismissed it because it wasn't right, and they'd passed on it. And I think most of the people that were at this gig had come to see the other bands, and they were all standing at the bar because they just assumed that Suede was still the same band that they'd seen a couple of months ago, except me. And I'd stood there and watched this and just thought, this is unbelievable. I knew watching it that I was watching something really special. I knew it just stood out completely different. There wasn't anybody doing what they were doing. They looked completely different to what anybody looked like at the time, even down to wearing these shirts that they were wearing, and even down to the hairstyle. The androgyny of Brett obviously was quite unusual. And I just thought they sounded like the Smiths and Roxy Music. That's what I was getting from it. And I thought, this is amazing. Of course, I thought I've got absolutely no chance of getting them. But I was the only person that rang them on the Monday morning, The only phone call they received was from me, and I met them up the day after. And, from there on, we kind of cooked a plan and a plot. And I wanted them to be the first band to release a single on Nude. So that's kind of where it started, really.
And they seem to get sort of an amazing amount of press attention right from the very beginning.
Well, that started at the point that I was involved. It hadn't started, but then you could feel that there was a little bit of a buzz building, and though I was going ahead to sort of just employ looking for people to do stuff around the project, like the press person, like making the record, finding a producer, so I was doing all the sort of obvious things that you do around an act without, just getting it ready, really. And the press thing was mental, because what happened there was that I'd met Steve Sutherland a couple of times, and he was at the time the editor of Melody Maker, and we hired a press person to do press on Suede, and they said they want to do piece on Suede, and it was like whatever, and it was like, I thought, great, I'm going to get some press in the band. It was like, but I was only thinking it was going to be a sort of little thing like, what Chapter House we maybe were going to get or something, or one of these other bands. And the night before the Enemy came, Melody Maker, should I say, the night before the Melody Maker, the Enemy, the Melody Maker appeared on the stands. I was at a gig at the Bull and Gate, and I bumped into Steve Sutherland, and he went, Suede, best new band in Britain, it's on the cover tomorrow. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, you were on the cover tomorrow, the Melody Maker, Suede, best new band in Britain.
And this was actually before they'd had a record out?
Before the record was out, and I still didn't understand what he was talking about. I thought he meant, maybe it's like a little drop-in thing that says Suede, best new band in Britain, like on the cover. But I wasn't expecting, what we saw. And at that time, getting something like that was much more powerful than it is nowadays, unfortunately. Nowadays, getting that actually doesn't have the same power whatsoever. But it was powerful at the time to get a front cover that was taken seriously. Of course, the Enemy was certainly more serious and more weighty, but both of them were healthy sellers as magazines, and at a time, as we know, where people were desperate for stuff. To get that front cover, to get that story, basically, got a lot of people very, very excited.
So, I mean, as fantastic as that was in itself, was that something that was a challenge to cope with that level of attention early in the life of the label? Yeah,
well, it was kind of it was a bit scary as well. It was a bit, oh dear, oh no. It was a bit of that. It was like, because it was kind of, wasn't expecting it. B, haven't got the band signed long term. How do I deal with it? How am I going to deal with this? It was a bit kind of, we just got to roll with it, basically, as, without sounding like Oasis song title there. but yeah, basically just had to go with it. And what could because everybody was happy with it and was excited about it, and you don't want to sort of. I think the good news was for me was that I had a very good relationship with the band, certainly early on, and we sort of had that mutual love for each other in a way, and it was good, and we all felt we were kind of part of the same gang, and I guess they felt I was their guy, and they liked that, and they really did despise the sort of major label kind of set up, and they were going to be suspicious of anyone now coming along anyway. So I knew that it was all in my favour, that everything that's happened, all the good feeling that happened up to this point was between us, not anybody else. So there was always the opportunity to as long as things developed, to continue with them, as long as I could find the right source. I knew I'm going to have to find some source of funding though, to be able to continue, because if this is developing, because it did develop very, very quickly, and from then on followed lots of other stuff, and then the single, we made the single, and the single was incredibly well received, and people were lauding it as a classic debut, and all of that was helping. And I remember even at the time Radio 1 were sort of not really supporting guitar bands, so even getting played on Radio 1 wasn't sort of such a big thing, they were still resistant to playing it. They, I think they were keen to know how this band were going to develop, but they certainly weren't jumping on the first single. But we managed to chart at number 49. But I mean, things moved so quickly that I think we were in New York that week. And that's
was that a disappointment almost after the sort of the press that had gone into it?
Well, no, because actually it would have been. It is a disappointment now, I guess, but it wasn't then, because then that was actually good. That wasn't a bad thing. I mean, I know it sounds bizarre to say it, but at the time that was actually quite an amazing result. It's hard to think about that now, I know, because now you think that's terrible. Actually, 49, considering all the press they had, but actually it was a very, very good, great start for debut single at the time.
So Saul, the chart success was fairly swift for Suede. Singles 2 and 3 were top 20 and then top 10 respectively. The album went to number 1 in the charts as you kind of almost a year into the life of the label as such, and you've had pretty much more success than a lot of labels have in 10 years. Did you have a chance to kind of reflect on that at the time?
I think at the time you're just trying to kind of keep a sane head and trying to kind of just kind of difficult to sort of actually enjoy it. I think you're just trying to keep it working and just trying to get the best out of it, more out of it. And obviously there was ideas to sign more acts as well and put some more records out, but obviously the Suede success was taking up a lot of time. It was, and there was no rush neither, in a way, because in a way I quite liked the idea of Nude being quality and not. I didn't really want to be this label just going out and sign loads and loads and loads of things. I think it was, and also I think the problem was, in a way, it was a problem, because when you find something as good as that or as special as that, it's kind of, where do you go from there? There was a bit of that. I felt a lot of pressure on me, sort of kind of the next band to sign if they're not as good as that. It almost feels like I feel like an artist myself, like making an album, So I did feel an element of that, but then I did think, well, I think there's going to be at least it's what it did do was it created a musical kind of genre, so there was a kind of thread for me to go down, there was a road for me to go down, and a lot of the things that followed, I think, did sort of have, not sound like Suede, but they kind of, you could see there was the right kind of reference there, to follow through, But no, certainly that first year was obviously we'd had international deals in place, and we'd done a deal with Sony, and that was we were a completely 100% independent label, but we had a licensing arrangement with them, and just to say actually, because it is interesting that at the time, a bit I forgot to mention was that of course the whole world were trying to sign Suede, remember, on the back of this one single, before the Metal Mickey that was out, the second single. There was, the band would be flown all over the world, and I was being called and meetings, and there was a lot of major labels trying to promise them everything, and then lie to me, And
how did you handle that personally?
Were you absolute nightmare?
Were you kind of saying, well, I'm going to sit back and let the band decide, or were you aggressive towards saying?
No, I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't. No. You have become. I think I was quite. I think I had. What I did was I had made a decision to do a deal with Sony, because I had to make a decision to do a deal with somebody, and then I presented the deal to the band and said, this is what we are doing, we want you to be part of this, you need to decide if this is what you want, and then they were out, and then there was other options they had and other things that they were pushing for, and I said, this is the only way it's going to work, so if you want us to carry on, this is how it's going to have to work. So it was that kind of thing, where then there was obviously some tweaking along the way, and from there on behalf of lawyers' behalf to try and fit it in, but ultimately I think all along I knew they always wanted to make it work, and there was never really any doubt, though it did drag on and stretch on for some time, and as these things do, and a lot of people were trying to turn their heads, and
so it must have felt like quite an achievement to get them signed to you, given the competition.
Absolutely. I mean, there were a lot of sleepless nights, but deep down, I kind of thought they're not going to do that to me. I just had a very strong feeling, even though they would never actually maybe say it to you at the time, as artists do, and they kind of like to maybe keep me a bit kind of on my toes. but deep down, I knew I could see by the, there was a look in their eyes or whatever. You could just tell when you were sitting in meetings that they want to be with me, they want to stay with me, they want to work it out, they're going to do that, as long as we can kind of get it resolved. And and I think as time went on, all the other players that were trying to sort of get involved in it realised that they weren't going to stand much chance, because I had such a strong relationship and strong hold with the band and I think people could see that was probably the right thing for them anyway. It was the right thing. It was silly for them just to go and sign to Warner's or something, or EMI or Geffen, which they could have done for the most insane amount of money.
And around the sort of end of the first year, you began working with a band called the Jennifers.
Yeah.
And two members of which were Gaz and Danny, that
indeed,
went on to form
actually, and then the other one, I
Supergrass.
think, ended up becoming one of the top video filmmakers, didn't he? I forget his name now, but he did all Gareth, I think. He did all the Jennings. I think he did all the
Supergrass videos
and many other bands,
yeah.
and many others who won awards and stuff. Yeah, we have 15-year-old kids from Oxford, smoked a lot of grass, no ambition. One great song called "Just Got Back Today," which I put out, which was image. The sleeve was nicked from a calendar. Was it a Pirelli calendar? I remember it was, you can't use that. You'll get sued. Oh fuck it, I'm going to use it. Pirelli calendar. I mean, that was the other great thing. Is that, going back to things like the artwork. I mean, that's another conversation we'll get onto, I guess. But things like the Suede artwork was incredible.
Yeah,
it was
very
really,
iconic.
really iconic. Really,
Yeah.
and it was all done by band. Created a lot of that, and I think looking back, that was great. And I tried to sort of do that, certainly for a period of time. And it was never always easy, because sometimes you can't kind of necessarily do it every time, every band. But tried to sort of do it with most things. Try and make sure that. Try and set the rule with the bands. Try and make sure that they were put in the best possible position to work with the best sort of people. And we got some art that looked great, so it always had some distinctiveness again and coolness about it. But this particular Jennifer's thing, this was just a Pirelli calendar with a girl licking an ice cream, and it was apparently we were going to get done, and we were going to get sued, and of course nothing happened. But we put it out anyway, they didn't have a follow-up very quickly, so that was the problem with them. It was just kind of dragging on, and I was so busy with Suede, I just had gone and listened to Bowie and The Clash, and then come back, you know what I mean? And they went and listened to Bowie and Clash, and I kind of took my eye off the ball a little bit, I think, with them, and then they wrote a song called Caught by the Fuzz and signed to EMI, so it was not regret, I was pleased in a way that I'd been part of their process and their development, and and I'd helped them, and they've always been kind to me on that and appreciated that. But yeah, it would have been nice to have had them on the Nude label, because they would have been a Nude act, certainly were a Nude act, and I think Supergrass made some great albums. So the first three albums are just really great records, good sounding records as well. So no, I mean, obviously the Suede first album was #1 and carried on, and then there was Brit nominations, and that was all quite funny. And then probably culminated in winning the Mercury Music Prize. That was probably for me probably the biggest achievement actually out of all of it, because that was just such an amazing night, and where we just had no idea whatsoever that we were going to walk away with it. I mean, I had no idea whatsoever until about, I think, literally 3 minutes before they announced the awards. Someone sort of came and whispered in my ear something about, would they be available for something or something, I don't know, in about 40 seconds. I was like, what? So, but that was kind of nice. But we're sitting around the table, everyone was getting very, very drunk. But I think that was kind of like a nice touch was to get that,
And then, obviously, off the back of that, you then sort of dealing with album number 2. At the very start of that process, can you remember feeling even a little bit of pressure that this has got to be as good, if not better, than what we achieved with the first album?
I think there was a real confidence from within the band, which kind of helped as well, and they were getting more and more ambitious and stuff. But the biggest problem we had to deal with at the time was the relationship between the singer and the guitarist. That was definitely waning, and that was becoming a bigger problem as time went on. As we got nearer into going into recording that second album, you could tell there was a problem. But at the time, I thought, well, this is what happens. You know, I thought it was healthy, unhealthy. Sometimes it's quite good. You know, when you've got that tension, but that tension got very bad, unfortunately. And you know, we got an incredible second album out of it, but it wasn't a great atmosphere to be around, I'm afraid.
And indeed, it ended with Bernard Butler, the guitarist, leaving the band.
Yeah.
I mean, did that, for you personally, did you think this could be the end of the band?
Of course. I mean, it imploded for many reasons. The whole thing imploded, and the thing was that Brett was so positive and so confident that there wouldn't be an issue. That I guess we all just went with it, and you know, he was like, "I'm the guitarist, what's the problem?" So, you know, I write the songs, I'm the main singer, I'm the guy. It's like, he's just, you know, we'll find somebody else. I don't know why we're worrying about it.
Incredible confidence, given that Bernard did enjoy, you know, a very high status as a guitarist, even, you know, so early in his career.
The ironic thing about it is, which it is ironic now, and quite incredible to think back on it, because it's amazing, is that at the time, it seemed ridiculous and impossible and beyond belief why a 23-year-old could really think that he could produce the second album by the band. And that was a very big part of what happened with the fallout. Obviously there were some other things, and he hated touring, and he was, I mean, with that I don't want to, I'm sitting here going to say anything nasty about him, because it's not, well, because he's obviously extremely talented guy, and there's two sides to each story, but it was difficult. But what is amazing is how he ended up becoming now, as we sit here in 2008, as, you know, being responsible for 3 or 4, you know, some of the hottest talked about acts.
Yeah,
Black Kids,
as a producer,
Duffy, Cajun Dance Party. I mean, you know, as a producer, yeah. So he's actually become an amazing producer, which is amazing. But at the time, that's what he wanted to do, but he was not prepared. He wasn't ready. No one thought he was ready for it. I don't think he was anyway. But, you know, and that was I think people were scared that he was just going to take over everything, and it was just going to be this control thing. And it's almost like, no, we can't have this. It's like, there's got to be a certain amount of democracy here. You can't just sort of just think you can just come in and take over everything. It's just going to be, that's not healthy.
And Bernard was actually replaced in the band by 17-year-old Richard Oakes.
Yeah.
Which I can remember caused a almost ridiculous press furore at the time.
At the time, yeah.
Were you involved in that decision in any way? And did you have your doubts about it as a decision?
I actually didn't. I mean, it was difficult because where'd you go after the Bernard thing? Obviously, it was hard, but I mean, obviously we'd finished the album. Obviously, we had to spin it in the right way that would go into this new album in a positive way. It was difficult because the band felt they were like, it was like the last gang in town. There was only 3 of them now at this point, and so even down to like the first single off the album probably was the wrong choice, and we shouldn't have gone with Where Are the Pigs, but that's what the band wanted. Actually, probably if you'd gone with something else like New Generation, probably might have done better, or I don't know, or Wild Ones, but you know. And I know that Sony were really upset with the decisions we were making in terms of choices, in terms of, you know, the release date, the release tracks that were going to come out. So yes, then they obviously had to replace Bernard for the tour and all that, and they rehearsed a whole lot of people, and you know, Brett said, you know, famously, plays like the devil or something, you know. I was invited down to a rehearsal room to see him play, and I was like, my God, he's amazing. But he was amazing because he can play every single Suede song as good as Bernard could play, and it sounded like Bernard. What I didn't know was, can he write songs? That's the thing we don't know. That's the thing you were never going to be able to know that at that point. All I knew is that he looked cool at the time, he could play, he seems like the absolute perfect, you know, person to fit in to her shoes.
Do you think that Dog Man Star as an album kind of suffered from all of those goings on? You know, did it seem to kind of lose a bit of attention musically as an album because of everything else that was going on around the time?
I don't think musically, I just think in terms of, I think in terms of its kind of achievements, probably in terms of its, I mean, because there was a sort of like, oh, but they've kind of, that's it now with them, they're not going to, you know, there was a bit of element, I think the press and stuff were a bit kind of, and I think also at the time, of course, there was the rise of Blur and Oasis. That was beginning to rise now. They were beginning to come to the fore, and there was other bands now beginning to, Elastica and all these other bands were starting up, and it was also, there was some, it was getting quite competitive again out there, wasn't it? And well, you know, they got some fantastic reviews of Dogman Star, 5 stars in Q and all this sort of stuff. And but yeah, no, I think there's no question it definitely had a little bit of a black mark going on, you know, because we knew there was this sort of, you know,
almost like a qualification, if you like, of what's happening with the band.
Yeah, it was a bit, you know, because also I was one of those people who believes in the perfect lineup and the perfect 4-piece and all that stuff and sticking together, and you know, as all the great bands do. And so it was a bit of a, I always felt it was a bit of a shame that so early on that wasn't going to be the case with them.
Yeah.
So. But
then if you kind of look at the next album coming up, that was actually their most successful album.
It was the most successful album commercially.
Yeah.
Biggest selling album we ever had. Yeah.
5 top 10 singles.
5 top 10 singles. Yeah. 5 top 10 singles.
I mean, did you not feel? You say commercially, did you not feel artistically it was their best work?
No, not artistically, but I was a big fan of the record. I think the record was great, and I enjoyed being around the making of that album. It was good fun. I was quite shocked, but I was like, my God, you know, he's going to do it again. You know, it was a bit like that, and I had belief in the band and a belief in Brett and the team that were producing it around it, Ed as well, Ed Buller.
They almost seemed to change as a band, you know, become a different band. They added in Neil, obviously.
Yeah, obviously adding Neil was an interesting element as well, yeah.
It was almost like Suede Mark II, if you like.
It was, yeah. I think that was a clever move as well. Adding Neil was perfect for them and what they were about, and again, it added that glamour again to it, and then androgyny to it again, and, you know, yeah, it definitely gave it more sexy edge, and, you know, and became more of a pop band, which was a good thing. But no. It was you know, I just mean from a personal point of view, it's, you know, it's not my favourite Suede album, but I mean it's a proud to moment to work with, and again, you know the whole visualness around the artwork was fantastic, and working with Peter Saville and people like that was great, and you know they were in a very strong position to work with whoever they wanted at the time. So it was, we trying to take advantage of that, being able to choose who we could, and you know, make it work. But and yeah, you know, 5 top 10 singles, as you said, which was fantastic.
And then off the back of that success, you were also introducing 2 new bands to the label that almost kind of seemed to have that initial press groundswell that Suede had, but never quite made the same crossover into the mainstream. That was Geneva and Ultrasound.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about your involvement with both of those?
Both of them different, yeah, and you're correct in saying that. I mean, Geneva, to be honest with you, were just, you know, 5 guys from Scotland, but they all lived all over the place. I think we got hold of a demo, and they weren't even called that. They were called Sunfish at the time, and I hated the name. And but I liked the fact that one lives in Dundee, one lives in Edinburgh, one lived in Glasgow. They all lived all over the place, but they sort of came together every weekend to rehearse, and so that intrigued me. And then I heard this stuff, and I went, this guy's got the most unbelievable voice. This is like Jeff Buckley. What is this? This is incredible. And this is before, you know, anyone had really heard a voice like that for a long time. So they were an original, I think, at the time. And I remember going to see them in a rehearsal room. Literally walked into the rehearsal room and said, I might do this. Within 3 minutes, it was just kind of gut reaction, and it was great to work with them. They didn't really have a manager or anything, so we did a lot of work ourselves and then developed them, and you know, and actually their first gig was supporting Suede at the Suede fan club show that they did, and we had to come up with a name. And we didn't have a name, and then I can't remember, the Geneva name just came about. I can't remember, there's a couple of names. And in fact, I remember Steve Sullen being there, again, when he was at the NME at the time. And I'd sent him the music, and he quite, maybe in hindsight, right? I said, what are they called? I said, well, they're just a Scottish band. And he loved the fact that the Scottish band, because obviously the whole kind of, you know, Scottish band, you know, the not Shakespeare, Macbeth thing,
the Scottish play,
exactly, the Scottish play. So he thought that was great. They were called the Scottish band. It probably should have been called the Scottish band. Now I think about it, I think it's quite good. So, and I said they're called Geneva, and he was like, oh, Geneva, like that. But they played, and that was their first gig. But no, they grew and developed and built a fan base, and slowly and got much excitement. And again, the press did write about them. They did get some great stuff. More, you know, put them in with Mike Hedges and made a really terrific first album and recorded in France. And you know, fantastic 3-4 first singles were great. But you know, we were struggling to kind of get past 21 in the chart. Really, in fact, the best song they had, you know, didn't do as well as I thought it should have done, which was a great song. I can't remember the name of it now.
Do you think it was possibly their sound was a little bit kind of out of kilter with what was?
Yeah, maybe.
You know, it was kind of the heavier sort of rock stuff with the you know, the likes of Oasis, the Verve, etc.
Yeah, I think it was probably an element. I mean, I think maybe they weren't. I think the voice was very distinctive. Maybe the music wasn't as distinctive, and maybe they just didn't have that sound. And I think also, you know, they were, you know, who knows? You know, who knows? I mean, they weren't. It just probably didn't. You know, bands connect or they don't connect. You know, and you know, they did connect to a level, but they weren't going to connect past that level. And I think live, they struggled. I always thought when I saw them live, I didn't think Andrew, the singer, was actually he wasn't as engaging as maybe he could have been at times, and that was always a little bit let down. And I think audiences want that, and they didn't get that.
And you had, I mean, with Ultrasound, you had almost
the opposite.
The opposite of that with Tiny, who was you know, probably one of the great lost frontmen of that generation.
To be honest, Ultrasound, you could probably write a book bigger than the Suede book, if I'll be honest with you. Because it's like the band that never did. Because it's just the stories are just so. I mean, Spinal Tap. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And in a way, they were the downfall of the label. If I'll be honest, the sort of Mark 1 of the label, because it cost so much money to do what we had to do with that band, and in the end, it sort of never really happened. But you know, certainly the initial thing about them was that I went to saw them, and I just thought, well, this is unbelievable. This is like Pink Floyd meets the Smashing Pumpkins, and they're amazing, and they're just misfits, and they just look misfits, and I just wondered, could it work? You know, could it work? And I thought, well, why not? Why can't it work? It would just be great to sort of. It was almost like a sort of like a. I'm going on this sort of mission just to sort of see if it works, and I'm actually, you know, spending.
I think it did. It did work to a level, didn't it?
Well, it worked to a level. The problem was that it all took so long. And it all took so long to come together in terms of the album. They all had arguments. They all fell out. They were a nightmare. They were one of the worst people to work together with. And just communication was just, I mean, it was just impossible. Literally. I mean, as individuals, take them all out of the band. They're all great, lovely, beautiful people. Put them all together as a band, as 5 individuals. It was impossible to get anything done. And so decisions couldn't be made, and they imploded, and despite all the advice they were given, despite having, you know, good people around them, in terms of they had started off with a manager who was inexperienced, but then got an experienced manager, Jeff Travers, in fact. I mean, it wasn't fun actually, because he wanted it to be fun, and they knew they had this potential, but they just made it so hard for themselves, you know. And there's just so many stories about them that are just, you know, you can laugh at it now, but at the time, you know, just because at the end you kind of have to they're the band, they're the artists, you have to kind of let them make their own decisions and whatever advice you give them. But I think they just weren't taking any advice at all, no matter what you said. Well, actually, you know, it's not going to work if you do that, or, you know, you should try it this way. No, they weren't interested. But even down to making the record, I mean, we had to make the album about 3-4 times, and producers were coming in and out of the studio. First person I worked with was Nigel Godrich, who was, you know, one of the greatest producers in the generation. And even I was, because I was so protective of the band at the time, even I thought that he had got so big time, or had some massive ego coming on the back of having done Beck and Radiohead or whatever, because he lasted 4 days and said, I can't work with this band. But the funny thing is, you know, sort of 7 months of recording with 3-4 different producers, the best production and the best piece of work, in my opinion, that came out of any of it is the 4 days they did with Nigel Godrich, which is kind of ironic, really. But the album came out, it was a double album. A double album, that's ridiculous. And I mean, by that time I was kind of like, yeah, whatever, double album, fine. Anything else you want? You know, we're going to do the artwork, we're going to paint the artwork ourselves, fine, you paint the artwork yourself, right, okay. You know, we're going to get this piece of canvas and we're just going to like, do this amazing art and we're going to deliver it to you to the office on Sunday night, which is what they did. And it was a bit of a shame really, because there were so many fantastic special songs that they had that it sounded okay in the end, the album, but I think it was just too much, and that's a little bit too late. I think there was a wait for it, you know, and you know, we kind of missed it a little bit, you know, because you know how it is when things are flowing. The album needed to come out, you know, when at the right time, and it didn't. It kept going back and back and back, and it went against us. So,
and it did obviously, as you say, cause the company, you know, a lot of problems. Around
it did.
2000, you were kind of, you know, sort of ceasing activity for what then it went on to be a fairly significant amount of time. I mean,
it did. I mean,
at the time, was it sort of you saying, "This is me taking a break," or "This is me leaving the industry as such"?
Going back to that just a little bit, I just wanted to add some other stuff in case you weren't going to mention them. But there was, you know, we had some other things like Black Box Recorder, which was great to have a top 20 single with Luke Haynes, and Low Gold, who were another band who were, you know, destined to do great things, and I guess again they also didn't sort of quite reach the mark. And I mean, we had big plans for Low Gold. We thought they were great, and you know, we sold a few albums, but I mean they weren't Coldplay, which they've been talked about as being Coldplay because they supported the Coldplay tour and stuff. But no, things became incredibly difficult. I mean, it's like the highs and lows, and sort of labels go through different periods. And the Suede thing obviously was coming to kind of at that point, because obviously we'd had Head Music following coming up, and then, you know, and that wasn't as successful maybe as that, though, you know, though it was still critically acclaimed, but wasn't as successful. But so it was a difficult time for us, and our deal with Sony was kind of, you know, was changing, and we had other partners that wanted to kind of, you know, do some business with us, so we were looking at that and just talking with them. So things were changing, but it was increasingly difficult to sort of see where I could go, and things.
I mean, it was kind of 2005 before you became, you know, active again as a label. I mean, what happened in those intervening 4 years, briefly?
To be honest with you, there was a lot of kind of soul searching, a lot of, you know, what am I doing, where am I going? I was going to try and do another label, and what I did do was, which I guess is sort of, well, I don't know, slightly frustrating in a way. First person to see Franz Ferdinand, first person to see the Arctic Monkeys, offered the Kaiser Chiefs a singles deal, right? I mean, all three of these things is what I did and happened, and I couldn't conclude any of them. So that was a big disappointment. I tried to do a new deal with Sony, and they were interested in doing a deal with me. And I told them about the Franz situation, but they just weren't listening, and so it was very hard to sort of do that. The Arctics had an opportunity to sign with my own money, but that window of opportunity I didn't take, which, you know, a lot of people in the same position may have done or may have not done. You just don't know. But regrettably, and the Kaiser Chiefs single thing as well was there, but that never came through. So I was out and about. I was looking at things. I was still very much part of what was happening, and I managed the Tears, which was Brett and Bernard's return, and did big record deal and a big publishing deal for them on that, and worked that for a year, which, you know, again wasn't great fun really, because it was pretty much reminded me what it was like with them two back in 94,
right,
33. It's the same kind of thing. They weren't really getting on at all. It was the same issues that existed.
So you came,
and then well, what happened was that I sat, and to be honest with you, what happened was that I felt that Nude was still a strong sort of brand, and felt it was still kind of, you know, relevant, and though with the way things were going with, you know, internet, and still the kind of people were still talking about the label to me, I felt it was still important to to put stuff out, and I thought of a good way of kind of kick-starting it again. One was putting together a compilation album, because of all the bands, particularly 3 bands that I mentioned, plus the Libertines and Razorlight and God knows how many of all these bands around at the beginning of around that period. There was at least 20 to 30 bands. Half of them aren't even around now, do they? I thought, well, I know all of them, I know all the managers, and I thought, why don't I just put a compilation out? Because no one's actually done that yet. And I came out with this title called Futures Burning, which I liked, and I thought the definitive guide to the new generation. And I found this sort of Bauhausy kind of Generation X, from Your Generation single sleeve. I kind of liked the artwork, and it was kind of remind me a bit of what Franz were trying to do, and I just kind of tweaked it a little bit and said, there's the artwork. And I went into V2 and I said, this is what I'm doing, I'm going to put this out, do you want to do it? And they were like, this is an amazing idea, and I went, yeah. So they basically funded it and said, well, let's do it, and they dealt with all the licensing, and I did all right, put that out, and to 10,000-15,000 I think or something.
I think off the back of that, you then started working with Jules.
Yeah, off the back of that, then I signed Jules, who are a band from Leeds, who are again a great band. We made an album with James Ford. Before James Ford became as a successful producer, he became doing Klaxons and the Arctics. And
again, that was very well received by the press.
Again, a well received record, but again didn't really connect in the way it could have connected. And there were some great songs. I think with them, difficulty with them was that they were evolving and developing as a band probably too quickly. They started off where they started off when I first saw them. They ended up somewhere different. And though they were great where they ended up, it was confusing people, I think. And so it was a pity that we couldn't manage to get them off the ground really in the way we wanted to. And they had they certainly had the right supports in terms of media and live dates. So yeah, we did a couple of singles as well with a couple of bands, and that's it really up until recently when I've just put out up to now a fantastic German artist called Get Well Soon. There's just one guy called Konstantin Groper, who's a sort of multi-instrumentalist, and he's sort of a real genius bedroom composer type guy, and basically made this amazing album that's sort of I don't know how to describe it, sort of tango, European brass, folk, electro, sort of Arcade Fire, Sigur Rós, Tom Waits, Nick Cave, Bright Eyes sort of area, and it's 2 tracks in the new Wim Wenders movie in November, and we just put the album out here in the UK and starting to get some nice favourable reviews, and they're doing some shows with Calexico. We're signed to City Slang in October and some other dates. So that's currently where we're at, as of today anyway. That's where we're working.
And that's a joint venture with Pinnacle.
That's a joint venture with Pinnacle.
You don't have major label involvement at all now?
No.
Does it feel like that is a comfortable place for you to be in 2008? Do you feel that you got yourselves into a position now where the label can go forward and hopefully enjoy many more years?
I'm not sure, if I'll be honest. What I'd like to do and what may happen is a different thing, obviously, because the industry is changing, of course, and selling music is changing, and not that whole thing is very different now to where it was. So it's just trying to kind of find the right model, and I'd like to expand it. I'd like to keep the brand and expand it into the Nude Music Group, and add other elements to it. We have done publishing in the past, and management and the live side of it. So I'd like to be able to do that, but at the moment it's the funding side of it is obviously it would be an issue. So it's who knows. I mean, I'm probably still going to try and use the Nude model, but the Nude brand, but I'm not sure whether there's going to be a terrific amount of music coming out on the label. Just until I'll be able to, unless I can find a way of working it out really. Though there's always the possibility that I'll find the most amazing band tomorrow, and if I do, then things change again, as you know. And if that happens, then it's all game on again, isn't it? Until then, it's sort of I'm sort of reassessing what I'm doing with everything really, and looking at other opportunities. In fact, even because I've got all this experience and knowledge now, so just try and find a way of going forward into the next couple of years.
So looking back across, 16-year history of the label,
Yeah.
would you say there's a favourite memory that sticks out?
Favourite memory? There's probably loads of favourite memories. There must be. And I'll probably forget them all. I thought the Mercury, I think, was great. As I said, that was just such a great night. I really enjoyed it. That was just such a high. But I mean, I'm sure there's lots of other things in my mind I'm thinking about, sort of keep crossing up. But funny stories and stuff, but without kind of going into any great detail.
Well, it's been great talking to you. It's been a really fascinating discussion.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for coming in today. And join us soon for more label stories on Cherry Red TV.